Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Banff World Media Festival. My name is Fern Cohen, and I'm the Executive Director of Banff. Okay. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the awful tragedy that happened in Orlando today. On behalf of the festival, our hearts are with all those affected by this heinous act. Our thoughts are also with all those affected by the recent devastating fires in Fort McMurray, right here in our host province of Alberta. But despite our heavy hearts, here we all are, in beautiful Banff, and grateful to be here. So on behalf of our team, we are very happy that you're here and that our festival is finally beginning. I encourage you to take advantage of all our event has to offer, to learn, to network, to get inspired, and most importantly, to celebrate great content. Thank you to our valued partners, speakers, and collaborators. We couldn't do it without you. Thank you to our wonderful board of directors for their ongoing commitment and support. And a special thank you to this year's Company of Distinction, the amazing HBO, and thank you to Bell Media for bringing them to us. And now to get us started, it is my great pleasure to introduce the chair of the Banff World Media Festival Board of Directors, the Chief Executive Officer of Entertainment One Television, John Moranis. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. 37th Annual Banff World Media Festival. 37 years old. Amazing. You guys look great. You look a day over 35. You're all young at heart. Bonjour et bienvenue à tous. As chair of the Banff Board of Directors and a longtime devotee and supporter of Banff, it's a privilege to be up here to get things going for what I know will be a very exciting and productive week. I always look forward to coming to Banff. Year after year, the festival brings together so many of our industry's best and brightest from around the world for an opportunity to reflect on our achievements and also plot out where we're headed next. I don't know about you, but this majestic setting inspires me to think in new and different ways about our industry. For example, I hiked up Tunnel Mountain this morning, and it gave me a whole new perspective on Over the Top. Pause for laughter. Okay. These are the jokes, folks. It's great to see a growing international audience as our industry becomes more and more global. Major international gatherings like Banff are increasingly important. Of course, Canada remains front and center and a key player on the global stage. In a few moments, we'll welcome a very special guest to the stage who will offer her insights on what's next for Canada's film, TV, and digital media sectors. I want to recognize all our delegates and partners who make this great festival possible. Merci à tous nos partenaires et délégués. A special thank you to our grand patrons, Chorus Entertainment, Bell Media, the Canada Media Fund, CBC, Rogers Media, Alberta Film, Telefilm Canada, and of course, HBO, who this year is honored as the Banff Company of Distinction. On behalf of the whole Banff team, we are so grateful for your continued support. I also want to give a shout out to Robert Montgomery, Fern Cohen, and the whole Achilles team for making this all happen. Feel free to applaud. It's okay. Feel free to emote as much as you want. You are in Banff. I also want to recognize my fellow board members for their commitment to truly making Banff a standout event. And of course, a big thank you to A&E, who is sponsoring this very exciting opening keynote. The Honourable Minister Mélanie Joly has called on all Canadians to have a conversation about the cultural landscape in Canada and re-examine the current model. We are honored that she has chosen the Banff World Media Festival as an important platform to further these valuable discussions. After the minister's remarks, I look forward to joining her for a fireside tete-a-tete. That's the last thing I'm going to say in French, by the way. Is it hot up here, or is it just me? To learn more about what our government partners envision for the future of our industry. But first, please join me in welcoming the Regional Director of Distribution for A&E Networks, Jim Babchuk. Jim?
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. On behalf of all of us at A&E Television Networks, we are delighted to be here at Banff. I'm proud to say it's our 20th year as a sponsor of Banff, and we look forward to many more years together in that partnership. We launched A&E in 1984, so A&E Television has been part of the landscape and the ecosystem of media here in Canada for over 30 years. We look forward to coming to this event year over year, seeing our friends, creating new relationships, enjoying the great scenery, and forming new bonds. It is my great honor and privilege this year to introduce Minister Joly as her first official visit here as the Minister of Heritage to Banff, and we look forward again to many more years of that. Since the formation of the federal government, Minister Joly has worked tirelessly as an advocate for creativity in the creative industries. She clearly understands the connection between the economic engine and innovation, and we are delighted to have her. So if everyone would please join me in welcoming Minister Joly.
Thank you. Thank you all. Just before I start, I would like, of course, to acknowledge and make sure that we understand that something terrible happened in Orlando, and all our thoughts and our hearts are with the loved ones of the victims. Bien entendu, je peux pas m'empêcher de penser que toutes nos pensées sont avec les victimes, en fait, bien entendu, mais avec les proches des victimes suite à cet acte effrayant qui a eu lieu plus tôt cette nuit et aujourd'hui. So, I'm very pleased to be here today. Very happy to see that so many of you are here. I don't know why. First of all, I want to thank the Banff Festival and Robert Montgomery, Fern Cohen, John, and all the team for this great opportunity that allows me to talk to you today. And I want to congratulate them on all the great work for organizing this event in this beautiful region of the country. And also, I heard through the grapevines last night at the CMPA barbecue, there was a new chairman, Scott Garvey. Scott, apparently you gave a very good speech, and that lots of things that I will be saying today will resonate with what you said yesterday. So, great news, and also congrats to Jamie Brown for your great work. Yeah, of course. Earlier this week, I spoke at the Economic Club in Toronto. I was there to pitch a great opportunity here in Canada. My goal was to talk to them about Canada's creative sector as an economic driver, to explore what business can do for culture, but more importantly, what culture can do for business. After all, my portfolio is at the junction of creativity and technological innovation. Of course, this is not new for most of you here today. I'm pretty much preaching to the choir. You understand better than anyone how you contribute to our economy. But what I can tell you is that the business sector has a lot to gain from supporting your work. And our government is very much aware of the role we can play to stimulate a creative ecosystem. As Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said in Davos last January at the World Economic Forum, for a long time, Canada was known for its natural resources. But more and more, Canada is known for its resourcefulness. And we are resourceful. On est très débrouillard. A great example is the creation of the predecessor of the Canada Media Fund about 20 years ago. Et j'aimerais d'ailleurs souligner la présence de Valérie Creighton qui est ici. Joint private and public investments allowed the independent production sector to develop across the country. This initial investment kickstarted a thriving industry. Since then, Canadian productions have been successful not only in Canada, but throughout the world. This is a concrete example of how government and the private sector can work together. I've called on the business sector to do this again. Let's work together. For us, of course, and all Canadians, I hope. Travaillons ensemble, à nouveau. We can collaborate to lead the transformation brought on by the digital shift. Nous pouvons collaborer afin d'entreprendre la transformation dans le contexte numérique. We can work together to take risks. Yes, it's a politician talking to you about taking risks and open up new markets to drive economic growth. Let's make Canada known for having one of the strongest, viable, and competitive creative sectors in the world. Now, let's look at numbers. Regardons les chiffres. When I refer to our cultural sector, it's bigger than what people normally think. It includes live performance, music, film, television, interactive media, and yes, video games. It's a large and growing part of the Canadian economy. According to recent stats from StatsCan, the cultural sector represents 3% of Canada's GDP, which is $54.6 billion in economic activity. It accounts for more than 630,000 jobs in the country, which is 3.5% of all jobs in Canada. Some of you may have heard this stat already, but it's important that I repeat it. The cultural sector is larger than the hospitality and food services industry, and also the agriculture, forestry, and fishing sectors combined. Beyond its size, what is so special about the cultural industry? Well, two elements are at its core: creativity and innovation. Of course, they're not exclusive to the cultural industries, but they're in there. It's in their DNA. By creativity, I mean thinking outside the box, reinventing the wheel, like Cirque du Soleil did when they reinvented the circus and dominated its market segment globally. By innovation, I mean pushing the limits of technology. For example, when the National Film Board led to the birth of IMAX, well, the IMAX format as part of Expo 67, and created a new profitable industry and a new on-screen experience. As you all know, innovation doesn't happen overnight. It takes investment, sustained effort, and partnership. So we have done well, but how are we performing globally? How are we performing in a global economy? How visible is Canada on the world stage? Well, let's look at the music industry. This is what the Billboard 100 chart looked like the week I was sworn in as Canadian Heritage Minister. That was on November 4th, 2015. A couple of weeks later, 5 Canadian artists occupied 7 of the top 10 positions: Alicia Cara, Drake, Justin Bieber, Shawn Mendes, and The Weeknd. Canada is the 3rd largest exporter of musical talent in the world. Just this past week, Yannick Nézet-Séguin, a product of the publicly funded Conservatoire de musique et d'art dramatique du Québec, was named music director at the world-renowned Met in New York. C'est un bel exemple du leadership dans l'industrie de la musique au Canada. We can look at the film and television sector. Just, Xavier Dolan is to cinema what Yannick Nézet-Séguin is to music. Just a few weeks ago, he was awarded the Grand Prix at Cannes. Et il ne faut pas oublier les 21 nominations aux Oscars cette année. Let's not forget the 21 Oscar nominations Canadians were behind this year. Denis Villeneuve, the Canada-Ireland co-production Room, Rachel McAdams. In 2014-2015, the value of television and film production in Canada topped $7 billion. Over $3 billion worth of that production was exported, a record high. And now let's take a look at the fast-growing video game sector. What do these titles have in common? Assassin's Creed, Mass Effect, Time Machine. They were all made in Canada. Canada is a world-class producer of video games, and this industry continues to grow. How fast is it growing? The number of studios in Canada has grown by 43% since 2013, and the industry's contribution to GDP has grown by 31%. Overall, 470 studios employ 20,000 Canadians across the country, from DHX Media in Halifax to Ubisoft and Warner in Montreal to Sony Picture Imageworks in Vancouver. The average age of their employees is 31-year-old, and average wage is $71,000. The Entertainment Software Association of Canada states that Canada's video game industry is the largest producer of video games in the world per capita. But really, why is it so important to Canadian businesses to understand the importance of culture? Because we're in the midst of a new industrial revolution, a major transformation that offers Canada and Canadian businesses a huge opportunity to grow even more. I'm not telling you anything new. Je vous dis absolument rien de nouveau. But of course, we now live in a world where digital trade is increasing exponentially. Digital is an area of growth. According to a recent report by McKinsey, 15 years ago, cross-border data flow was minimal. But the same report states that the use of bandwidth is 45 times greater than 10 years ago. Meanwhile, the same report states that the growth of trade in goods has flattened. Key takeaway? Much of the future lies in digital goods and services. A huge part of this data is culture. For example, in May 2015, report says that at least 36.5% of downstream bandwidth in North America is streaming Netflix alone. More than 400 hours of video is uploaded to YouTube every minute. But even beyond pure cultural products and services, we know that creativity and innovation are key to success in other industries as well. Finance, banking, IT, agriculture, and the list goes on. Many countries in the world are asking themselves how to tap into the unrealized economic potential of culture. So how do we ensure that Canada is an early leader? First, it's my firm belief that Canada's competitive advantage in innovation lies in part in the existing strength of its cultural and creative sectors. We already have a head start on creativity, but we can do more to build the systems and support innovation. We need to better understand ecosystems that will create space and encourage the cross-pollination of cultural products. Of course, the Banff World Media Festival is an example of an event that fosters innovation by creating a space for cross-pollination. Another example is when video games designers such as Ubisoft partners with Canada's National School of Theatre in Montreal, une collaboration entre Ubisoft et l'École nationale de théâtre à Montréal, to go beyond motion capture, but to develop also emotion capture techniques. And they asked Cœur de Pirate, a very talented singer and songwriter, to record the soundtrack for one of their latest games, Child of Light, allowing her to reach a global audience through a different channel, qui a permis, bien entendu, à Cœur de Pirate de rejoindre un nouveau public via une nouvelle plateforme. Research shows that when more traditional sectors of the economy use creative inputs, they get better quality products, a more diverse product line, and in the end, higher profits than those companies that did not use creative inputs. Second, in terms of how we position Canada as a leader in this digital transformation, we must have a competitive workforce. And key to a competitive workforce in the 21st century is creative capacity, which will be critical to the success of all economic sectors. The World Economic Forum recently declared that creativity is rising fast as one of the most valued skills. Why, you ask? Advances in robotics and artificial intelligence will dramatically increase the complexity of tasks that machines will be able to do. But what robotics and artificial intelligence cannot do, at least in near future, is to think creatively. Think tanks like Martin Prosperity Institute explicitly connect culture to creativity and creativity to improve growth and sustainable prosperity. Last year, the Institute ranked Canada 4th in creativity among 25 nations it studied. It's a better starting position for Canada than most other measures of competitiveness. But it's one I'm determined we improve on. But as it stands now, we're not ready. On n'est pas encore prêt. And this is why our government took bold steps in the area of culture and creativity. Our government invested $1.9 billion in the creative sector and also committed to the development of an export strategy. C'est le plus important réinvestissement en art et en culture en 30 ans. It's the most important reinvestment in arts and culture in 30 years. And we're the only country in the G7 doing so. I must say, since we announced the $1.9 billion, Italy followed with a reinvestment of $1 billion. So hey, leading the pack. I believe that fostering creativity requires deliberate government investment and leadership. But government involvement doesn't stop at funding. We have a critical role to play as a catalyst, as starting a new conversation about the relationship between creativity, innovation, and economic growth. This is why I launched broad consultations to better understand the challenges and opportunities brought on by this transformation. It's time to rethink the federal government cultural policy toolkit. This exercise hasn't been done since 1991, and needless to say, it predates the digital era. But we can't engage in this exercise alone. We all have a role to play. Some of you in the crowd today may have participated in our pre-consultation phase, which ended on May 27. The team at the Department of Canadian Heritage is assessing the results and preparing for next steps, which you will be hearing from us later this summer. Today, I want to give you a flavor of what we heard, and it paints an interesting picture. Je vais vous donner un bref aperçu des résultats préliminaires de nos pré-consultations. First of all, we had an impressive participation. Almost 10,000 Canadians completed our questionnaire. We were in the top 3 most important government consultation during the spring. when it compares to defense policy, it's pretty good. We had a close to even split between the general public and stakeholders. 46% from the public and 54% from stakeholders. Second, looking at some preliminary results, it won't be a surprise for you to know that the vast majority of respondents, general public and stakeholders, considered it that is important to have access to Canadian content in a digital world. The same is true for local content. A majority of respondents from both groups consider having access to local content in their community as important. This will not be a surprise to you again, but Canadians want to have access to free and inexpensive content while the industry is facing the challenge of monetizing digital platforms. Third, our respondents have told us that efforts for promoting and branding Canada abroad are considered key for the success of Canadian content on the world stage. We also understand that we have to do a better job at Canadian Heritage to explain to Canadians what is Canadian content and what are the challenges ahead when it comes to the digital shift. Nous devons être capables de communiquer l'importance de cette consultation aux citoyens, et beaucoup mieux. The next phase of the consultations will be in the fall. We will be going throughout the country, meeting people in different locations, meeting citizens and stakeholders such as artists, journalists, TV, radio, and web broadcasters, producers, and distributors. Well, of course, I'm talking about all of you. I strongly believe that in order to position Canada as a global leader, we need to do a better job of promoting creative environments and talent, and fostering quality, innovation, and yes, risk-taking. As I was wrapping up my speech at the Economic Club earlier this week, I called on the private sector to make business investment in the cultural sectors, invest even more in creativity in the workplace as means of driving innovation, and support cultural projects to help to build a more creative community. As contributors to the creative economy, you understand that these investments are likely to pay off in many ways. Culture plays a crucial role in shaping our identity and feeding our souls. La culture est un élément important dans l'affirmation de notre identité, de nos identités, et est une source de fierté. But at a more practical level, I believe that public and private sector investments made in culture will be increasingly important to our economic success. These investments will help us develop a more competitive workforce, build the most innovative and profitable companies, and fosters the most creative communities. What I'm calling on you to do is how can you work with each other and with the government to prepare all of us for the digital future. This is an audience of long-standing media companies, disruptive digital startups and multinationals, producers, creators, and innovators. I challenge you all to think about what we can accomplish together. How can we leverage this ecosystem to foster new ideas? For our friends in the room from other countries, think about how Canada can offer opportunities for you to partner with in creating a world-class content ecosystem, and how investing in Canada can pay off for you. Our government has taken bold steps in terms of financing culture and starting a conversation about what we need to do to succeed. I'm looking forward to benefiting from all your ideas and creativity. What we do today to encourage culture, creativity, and innovation will bear fruit. It's a gift to our future. So let's make sure we become a world leader. Thank you. This is when you ask me tough questions.
Sit over there.
Okay.
I have notes, but I'm not going to use them. First of all, thank you so much for allowing me to interrogate you. Have a conversation with you today.
Thanks.
I want to start off, you've got a very diverse, broad portfolio. So can you just share with us some of the most striking observations that you have since you were first appointed?
Well, of course, when I was appointed, there were lots of things that were interesting in the mandate letter given to me by the Prime Minister, and also we committed during the elections to reinvest massively in the creative sector. But I was also convinced that the model needed to be rethinked. And in that context, I was very much early on really into looking at it in a holistic way. And I'm a product of my generation. I think digital first. And I'm also very proud of what is being done here. And I know that we can do even more if we develop the right model. So that's why I decided not to be reactive, but rather proactive. And I knew also that I would have a lot of support in the cabinet to launch these public consultations to develop this new model. So this is why this was one of the most striking observations. The second one is I tend to talk all the time to intermediaries. And there is a need for sure to talk to artists, musicians, content creators themselves, because I need to be able to have the point of view of all the people working in the ecosystem. And of course, to continue to talk to intermediaries, but the system was done, and it was pretty much easier for people at Canadian Heritage to talk to some intermediaries. And so that's another one. And the other thing also is, well, in general, there's lots of interest on the part of the public to change the conversation, which is very different from the past 10 years. And this is why I'm not surprised that 10,000 people participated in the Canadian content pre-consultations. And I'm pretty much convinced that it won't be only the same people that voice their points of view, but that we will be going through Canada and citizens will want to participate in this conversation. And I really hope that we can work all together to make sure that all voices are heard.
That's great. You're from the digital generation. I'm from the black and white movie, silent movie era.
No, John.
So we have a very different
analog.
perspective.
We call that analog, and analog is very important.
So important. Also, help me. Also, does it matter that I actually filled that questionnaire 3,000 times? Is that an issue?
Well, we're not that dumb at Canadian Heritage.
Okay, just checking. But in all seriousness, you talked a lot about creative industries and creativity and how important that is, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I think you've even mentioned natural resources. And that's the way I look at the creative industry and creativity in Canada. It's a protected natural resource. We have to make sure that stays in Canada.
Sure.
And so I'm excited to hear that's something that is important and you understand the value of it. How do you see, and what are your observations, having talked to already a number of constituents and stakeholders, how do you see marrying that sort of creative necessity with also business models that create sort of a commercial viability in our very challenging, and in your words, now a digital ecosystem.
So, John, what would be your answer to that
I
question?
knew you were going to say that, and it's really so typical.
No, it's
So
not.
what you're saying really is that it's the industry needs to tell you.
I'm not an expert in monetizing content. My role is to hear you and to help to make sure that the ecosystem is not only viable, but very, very vibrant. And I'm your champion. I'm the industry's champion at the cabinet table in Parliament. I'm there to advocate before the Prime Minister and the PMO, the Prime Minister Office, and Finance. But I'm there also to make sure that we build a resilient new model that will be able to face technological changes and different types of content consumption. I'm very much aware that when building this new model, there's going to be a transition phase. And people from all ages and throughout the country don't necessarily, they don't consume content in the same way. So that's why the conversation is important, but also finding ways to help that transition will be key. And that's why, it's a shared responsibility. We as a government need to develop that new model, but you all have a responsibility to embrace change, to find new ways to be competitive, to outsmart other people in the world, and also to, of course, advocate your own interests.
I think that's a great way to phrase that. This industry is made up of a very diverse, broad cross-section of constituents, from creators, developers, producers, distributors, people in the digital side, people in the sort of more conventional space. So I'm not asking for any answers, but maybe you could help us or give us some advice, perhaps, because it is challenging and everyone comes from a different point of view, which has always been a challenge, I think, in our industry about trying to create consensus or a way to move forward. I think there's a lot of people here that are very nervous, have a lot of anxiety about change.
Yeah, and I understand that anxiety. I understand it, and at the same time, we're not the only country in the world. You are not the only content creators or distributors going through that anxiety. Every minister of culture in the world is asking itself how to deal with this. And except for two countries, which is US and India. And in that context, I think we can have a leadership role because we're tapping it in, to a certain extent at early stage. Although, you've all gone through the fact that OTTs are increasingly popular and that your children are talking about YouTube channels and laughing at you if you're not on Facebook yet or not understanding Snapchat. But this is why I think when I was saying in my speech, the government has a role, yes, to fund, but also to help foster that new model. I think this is where the opportunity lies. And I went into politics because I wanted to hack the system, like I say. I really believe that government can be a vector of change, and that for a long time it was really hard to change institutions because, of course, we're always risk adverse, especially politicians. We're scared of losing popular support. We're scared of not being elected again. But this is not about, this is about doing the right thing. We know that we need to change our way of thinking. We know we have to better our culture when it comes to assess the reality of digital. it's not putting back the genie in the bottle that will help us. It's really making sure that we're bold and we can develop that new model. So when it comes to what you can do, sometimes we have a tendency to think that people know what we think, that people know that what we've gone through since the beginning of the day. You have no clue what I did this morning. I have no clue what you did. So the reality is, in order for you to get your interests heard, you need to participate in these consultations. We need at Heritage to know what are your business models, what you think is interesting, where are the opportunities, where are the challenges. If you don't say it, we won't know. And that's why I've been meeting a lot of people. I had a roundtable this morning. I'm going from coast to coast to coast on this, and hearing from citizens, musicians coming to see me, asking for a different type of model, looking into the Copyright Act, et cetera, and I need to hear this, because if I don't hear it, well, nobody at the cabinet table will hear it. The Prime Minister won't necessarily hear it. The Minister of Finance won't necessarily hear it. So this is how it works. The decision making is about making sure that we're connected to what you think, what the population thinks, and then afterwards developing a new model and making sure that we have the right ecosystem.
Did I mention I hiked Tunnel Mountain this morning?
That's nice. Never did that.
Okay.
Yeah, we went next to the Bow Valley River.
Yeah.
Next time I'll invite you, John.
Beautiful. It's really gorgeous. Yes, thank you. I appreciate that.
This was not in the...
I know.
No,
I know.
okay.
I'm ambushing you a little bit.
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
think of me like Phil Donahue. He was a guy that used to be on the... Okay.
It's first good.
Now, I, of course, like most people, love a good YouTube cat video. Like, I can't get enough of them. But...
I think there's YouTube people here.
There are, and
okay.
Thank you so much. But I have a point here. And this may seem like a leading question, but it's not. We have a very complex regulatory Canadian content system. It's been around for years and years and years before the YouTube cat videos. And I know you've mentioned, everything's open for discussion. I know it's still early days. You're reviewing, you're discussing, you're going from coast to coast to coast. But can you share with us, especially as someone from the sort of the digital age? I know this joke's going to go bad really quickly, but can you help us understand, because you've got a lot of people that have been doing this for a long time and embracing the old system, Canadian content rules, quota requirements. And it seems to me in this day and age where you can watch anything, anytime, anywhere, a lot of these rules may not be relevant any longer. Mm-hmm. But to a lot of people, they seem to be sacrosanct, and sort of they're so much about what Canadian culture is, what Canadian content is. Mm-hmm. Again, not asking you to share any big secrets. I know it's just the beginning, but can you at least help us understand or share what your thinking is about when you look at those rules and potentially overhauling them? Because it's scary to people.
Yeah, well, of course, the point system. Some of you have raised that question when it comes to what is Canadian content. So what do you think is Canadian content?
You're going to say that again.
And if the system is you don't like it, what do you suggest? And if you want to get rid of certain criterias, what are the impacts? And what will you say to other, to unions or to artists, or and at the same time, do you have other systems in the world that could be seen as a best practice that we could, we could be influenced by these systems? So this is about making sure we have the best system. We know there are places in the world where they're thriving, and that are, to a certain extent, similar in population or in GDP. There are interesting things happening in Scandinavia. There are interesting things happening in South Korea. And there are great things here happening also. So I'll be having a discussion with all the ministers of culture, culture ministers of provinces, so in Victoria and BC, beginning of July, and I'll have the chance to meet a lot of my counterparts in the world later in August. So, of course, these are questions we're asking ourselves. And many ambassadors also in Ottawa have been interested in what we're doing and have been looking into, okay, so what I would like to talk about what's going on in Canada and and we can give some, interesting developments to our own government back home. So it's not as if, when I say I really hope that we can become a world leader, I really believe so. And I think also that in this new world, the public consultation title is Strengthening Canadian Content and Export in a Digital World. This is how we look at it. So that's important to bear in mind.
I think that's a great segue. I want to talk to you about sort of the export side of our business. I do want to add one thing which is interesting, because I totally agree that best practices is very important. We have to look at what our industry is doing in other countries around the world, and we also, should be looking at this from a ground-up approach as opposed to just looking where we are. And I think you've mentioned that, which is great. I do think Canada is unique in that we're right next door to the biggest cultural exporter in the world, and they speak the English language. The culture is very similar, and I think that's always been a big challenge for Canadians, is to deal with being next door to that behemoth. And so I think it'll be an interesting and challenging conversation they're going to have with Canadians, and I'm excited to hear more. But I do want to,
if I may, John,
absolutely.
I think also what is important is that, and I've said that earlier to some of you, there is a social contract in this country about supporting our identity and making sure that we support our two official languages, which is French and English. And that social contract part is, of course, underlying this entire consultation process, because we profoundly believe as a government that we have a role to play. Of course, I've talked a lot about a much more economic development, point of view, but there is one which is based on our identity and the importance of social cohesion. And this is why, bearing in mind that we have a neighbor that is the world's most important content exporter, we need to support our Canadian businesses, content creators. And this is why there's that entire set of rules. And this is why also the idea is to have that new policy for strengthening content in French and in English.
Couldn't agree more. Can you tell me a little bit why you think the export of Canadian content is so important?
Well, in my mandate letter, it's written that I have to relaunch, modernize two programs that were shut down by the past government, and it was ProMarts and trade routes. But so I've taken that, and my team and I have taken that, but we want to do more. And I've been talking a lot with the international trade minister, it's Chrystia Freeland, to develop an entire new cultural export strategy, because I believe that we do such amazing content, and we can do even better Canadian content if we can have access to different markets. And this is why we have in mind, we've committed 35 million over 2 years to support cultural export. But this is why also, following the consultations in the model, there will be the first time in history cultural export strategy for Canada. And we're inspired by, what Britain has done, Cool Britannia, South Korea. But we want to hear what's the best way to do it.
That's great. I think it's a great way to finish off. Thank you so much. A delight to talk to you.
Thank you, John. A pleasure.
Thank you. Minister Joly, everyone. Thank